Hello, all. Welcome to Last Week in America. As always, I am your host, Bob. I am an intern at the American Center Moscow, and I just want to first off say welcome. We got a pretty good show this week. We're gonna talk a little bit about some things going on with the U.S. mail system. That's really kind of at the forefront of everything. Then I think we're gonna talk a little bit about the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, which took place on Monday. And finally, we got some really interesting news coming in from some American top universities and how they're dealing with COVID in this very difficult environment in the U.S. right now for education. So before we get into everything, I just want to say welcome. Always happy to have you guys and chat with you guys. Before we get started, I just want to say you should go check out the American Center Moscow page. They have a ton of really cool shows that they post almost daily. And I saw like 2 weeks ago, they did a show on American comedy and humor that was pretty interesting. And they've been doing a lot of stuff with space recently. They had the U.S. ambassador to Russia. So a lot of really cool content. As always, we do Last Week in America every single week, typically today at this time. Um, so last week we covered some pretty interesting stuff as well with like TikTok, some financial COVID things in the United States, and the selection of Kamala Harris by the Democratic nominee Joe Biden. So anyway, I just want to say welcome to everybody. Please, we got 13 watching right now. Throw some comments in the chat box. I'm watching you guys. Not watching it. I'm watching the chat. And I love really interacting and chatting with you guys, and it really helps the show go smoother. And so throw some comments in there. I just want to warn you, I have a little bit of a tickle in my throat, so I might have sound a little nasally. I don't know why. I'm fine. But I just if I sound a little different and a little congested, I got a little tickle in my throat. Anyway, so good morning, guys. Right now, I am in my hometown of Mendham, New Jersey. It's a small little town in northern New Jersey, about a half hour, 45 minutes maybe outside New York City. So right now I'm sitting there, and this is my childhood bedroom. As you can see, I got a lot of pictures of some maps. I've always been a little history buff, and there's probably like a little big picture of me as a child. Grapefruit Orange asks, "Hi Bob, how was the wedding you went to last week?" Oh, hey Grapefruit Orange, hope you're having a great day. It wasn't actually a wedding; it was a bachelor party. I'm actually in the wedding party, and we went out into a little cabin in the Poconos with just me and some close friends. The Poconos is like a big wooded area, wooded, hilly, mountainy area in Pennsylvania. So we were actually supposed to go out and originally planned to do New York City and rent an apartment there for a weekend, but unfortunately, with COVID, that's proved not to be the most intelligent decision. So we kind of decided to go and be pretty isolated from everybody else, and it was a great time. It was really nice seeing everybody, just me and a lot of my college friends, and the groom was really he seemed like he had a great time. So I'm excited. I'm actually going to come back for the wedding in October. So I'm flying back to Seattle in the next few weeks here, and then I got to come back for the wedding, which is going to be exciting. But yeah, thanks for asking, man. I appreciate thanks for asking. I appreciate you remembering. That's very kind. But yeah. Anyway, so let's get into it on the first slide. A little about me quickly. So obviously my viewers have probably seen this like a lot about my little about me slide. But for any new viewers, first off, I just want to say welcome. Welcome to the show. Feel free to comment if you have any input or anything or not. It's no judgment zone. If you have any questions for me, always go ahead and ask. Not a big deal. I'm really happy to answer and engage. Uh, so I am currently, obviously an American citizen. I grew up in northern New Jersey, and then I went and got my undergraduate degree at a small school in upstate New York, where I've studied history and Russian language, and then I moved down to the shore, worked and bartended for a bit, and now I actually live full time in Seattle, Washington, which is on the West Coast, the Pacific Northwest, and I'm getting my master's at the University of Washington in Seattle. So it's pretty cool. The campus is pretty downtown and urban, and definitely a little different from where I went to undergrad. So yeah, it's cool. So I'm mostly looking at I guess press freedom and such. And like the historical development of that in countries in the former Soviet Union. So that's kind of my main area of interest. But also, I love the history aspect, and I'm really big into Tsarist history and late imperial history, actually, really from emancipation up until revolution. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, guys. So this picture actually is the post office from where I live in New Jersey, from my hometown, and it's not a random picture. We got some interesting stuff going on with the USPS, the United States Postal Service. So I wanted to show a little what like a post office looks like in the small town USA. I mean, where I grew up is really old America. Like it's I mean, old for the United States is like 1700s, but which is not old for Europe and Russia especially. But this is like kind of like what the houses kind of look like. Is they're called colonials. Is what we is like the architectural design. And that's pretty common around where I am. So yeah, so that's kind of like what it looks like kind of around here. It's really cute and pretty, and I like the architecture a lot more than, say, architecture in like LA or out west, where it's a little bit more modern. But yeah, and I know like the town, like George Washington camped the winter in the town right over from me. So it's a lot of deep history here, which is pretty cool. But anyway, so let's get into our first topic for the post office. All right, so we'll go to the next slide and chat about that. So I don't know if it has reached Russia, but there's been huge issues with the United States Postal Service in the United States right now, and it's kind of taken on a really big role with the current political atmosphere of the country. So yeah, it's kind of really on the forefront of the conversation for politics and the election, and I thought we might as well just kind of go into that and talk about that this week because as always, it gets more and more as we get closer and closer to November. These topics get more and more influential and popular over the course of time. So anyway, so following the impact of the coronavirus, the United States Postal Service has dramatically slowed their delivery of mail. So the reason for this, and you'd think that, oh, COVID, like people aren't sending mail as much maybe, or how does that work? It's because the United States Postal Service does not run on taxpayer money, and it's actually a part of the U.S. It's a U.S. department. So it is government affiliated, but it's actually subsidized by fees for stamps and such, and for actual mail going out. So it doesn't lean on government money or taxpayer money to fund the system. It's privately funded on its own through business. So that's first off, that's a fundamental issue with this. And then a lot of postal workers, since they're very essential workers in the United States, have to go to work, and a lot of them have come down with COVID-19, and some died. So it's really taken a big toll on the Postal Service. So financially, the further issues, mail volume has fallen by 30% since 2006. So obviously, this is kind of 2006 is as email and other online electronic messaging systems have become more and more and more popular. And obviously, since then, I mean, we rely really very heavily on email and like text messaging even, and to be able to like communicate. Like I don't really know like when the last time I really sent a letter was. I mean, I occasionally I'll send a letter to my significant other, but like that's more of just for the novelty of it, as opposed to like actively going and sending in things. And like even taxes and everything, now everything's all done remotely and online. So it's tough for the United States Postal Service because they rely on the funding from the mail actually. So that kind of that's another reason for how they're kind of in some straits and some issues. But yeah, and also there's a lot of new competition on the market. So there's always been UPS, United Postal Service. That's a big one. That's completely private. They do mostly larger packages. FedEx does the same thing as well, Federal Express, and that's private as well. So um, only the USPS, United States Postal Service, is actually the full is a government entity. Um, but these other guys are private competitors. And also with the rise of Amazon as the forefront and Amazon Prime, I'd imagine that it is popular in Russia as well. But in the United States, it's Amazon Prime is king. And I actually worked for a winter for a holiday as a holiday delivery driver. So actually would go and ride along with a UPS worker and deliver packages, and the overwhelming majority of them were Amazon packages. And now to meet that void, Amazon has gone and created their actual own postal service where they have their own package deliveries and such. So by having these competition, the market obviously gets more diluted, and the USPS is unable to make money. Especially, they mostly specialize in like mail as opposed to delivery of packages, and the margins are a lot higher on boxes and such. So that's kind of a little background behind it for what's going on and why the USPS is in kind of an economic downturn and having a really tough time in the U.S. right now. So it's pretty important to understand and know this before getting into the politics behind it and everything that. So just wanted to say that. So if we go to the next slide, we can see there kind of this is a little slide for it's the American Postal Service Union. Actually, that this was a rally and a protest, and you could obviously see people wearing masks and such. So the Postal Workers Union are actually they've endorsed the Democratic Party, the head of the union, as they kind of see their life getting as they like see their the life of the company just dying. So just wanted to show that, and that's kind of the introduction to the politics behind it. We have a comment from Dasha Girikova. So the speed of Russian postal service is a really funny joke. It works very slowly, even without COVID. That's funny. I actually have our discussion questions today for this little segment. Actually, kind of follow. I ask a little bit about the Russian postal service because I know nothing about it. So interesting. Yeah, I'm excited to hear about your actual input on it and what it is. Typically, it's pretty. The USPS typically has been very good in the past. It's very efficient. I don't even know how they do it. It's crazy. And like, but ever since like COVID and stuff, we've seen a lot of like cards get lost in the mail, and like I'll have a lot of orders and that I'll order like trading cards or something like that, and they'll get lost in the mail, which is kind of really unprecedented. And I like looking at the communities of the people that have a similar interest with me in that hobby. Like they've also lost a lot of trading cards and stuff. So yeah, no, it seems like there's been a little bit of an issue. So anyway, before we get into this, and this is obviously the politics, everything always gets a little serious. So I just wanted to show a really funny clip from the popular American show Seinfeld. If you haven't seen Seinfeld, it is absolutely hysterical and one of my favorite sitcoms, and kind of redefine the whole sitcom world. So yeah, if we could go and play that now in a minute. I just want to show you guys. It's about a minute long, but yeah, just kind of in jest with the USPS. So anyway, let's get to that.
You look at this. More catalogs. Omaha Steaks, Mac Warehouse, Newsweek. I can't stop all these companies, so I'm going to attack this problem at the choke point. Stop the mail? That's even better. Hey, you know what? This is all your mail. They're putting it in my box now. See that? Oh, that's it. They have gone too far. They keep pushing me and pushing me. Now I got no choice but to go down there and talk to them.
May I help you?
Yeah, I'd like to cancel my mail.
Certainly. How long would you like us to hold it?
Oh, no, no, no. I don't think you get me. I want out permanently.
I'll handle this, Violet. Why don't you take your 3-hour break? All right, calm down, everyone. No one's canceling any mail.
Oh, yes, I am.
Well, what about your bills?
The bank can pay them.
The bank. And then, well, what about your cards and letters?
Email, telephones, fax machines, FedEx, telex, telegrams, holograms.
All right, it's true. Of course nobody needs mail. What do you think you're so clever figuring that one out? But you don't know the half of what goes on here. So just walk away, Kramer. I beg of you.
Is everything all right here, Postal Employee Newman?
Yes, sir. I believe everything is all squared away. Isn't it, Mr. Kramer?
Oh, yeah. As long as I stop getting mail.
Yep. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. It's pretty good with Kramer and he's trying to stop the mail. And there's a few other scenes from that episode where he goes and he's like tries to like actually like put bricks in his mailbox and stuff, and then they just start like piling it on and just putting it in everybody else's mailbox around him and stuff. So yeah, it's a pretty good funny little skit. But yeah, Elizabeth Casas, yeah, they work awful. That's funny. And then Michael, yeah, there's one thing we have in common: lots of trash mail. Yeah, we call that actually. Here we call it junk mail, I guess. Yeah, whereas you go and there's just so many like catalogs and things that you never ask for, and they go right into garbage. And they're always addressed to the resident of this place, like personal ever. So that's what the majority of my mail is. I check it all the time, and I like actually never get any mail anyway, so nobody really notifies me in the mail. So yeah, I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. The show is called Seinfeld. Seinfeld, Seinfeld. It's a really, really famous American show with Jerry Seinfeld. The whole premise is he lives in New York City, and he's like a famous comedian. So it's like very 90s and 80s. It's really good. So yeah, and it is Seinfeld. But yeah, check it out. Anyway, so let's go into a little bit of the junk mail. Oh, not the show, Dana. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, we call it we don't call it trash mail. We call it junk mail. And there's actually like a thing in your email called junk, and that comes from that. So it's junk mail, JUNK mail. But and it's kind of just it's a synonym for trash, junk, trash. Trash is like more like garbage, but junk would be like an old car part or something that, or like an old tire. That's junk. So anyway, good question though. Sorry, I didn't misunderstood at first. But anyway, so let's talk a little bit about the history of the USPS. As you guys know, who've been watching my video, I like to go talk about a topic and then get into the little history behind it. So yeah, so the USPS was founded in 1775. That's during the Second Continental Congress, and it was one of the big things by Benjamin Franklin. He was to make a push to have a United States Postal Service as kind of one of the things they needed to create it for themselves to stop relying on the British. So, and he was elected. Actually, it wasn't an elected position. Actually, he's never been an elected position, but he was chosen to be Postmaster General, and that's Benjamin Franklin. He's one of the founding fathers of America. And actually, during the Revolutionary War, he was in France and England talking to the people, to the British, to try to like hash out a peace deal. And he was pretty integral in making sure that the French joined the American revolutionaries and the rebels against the British Empire. But anyway, so the post of the Postmaster General is like the head of the post office, and he holds a cabinet position in the United States. So that means that it's like with Secretary of State and other like Secretary of Treasury and all these people, the kind of head departments, every single time a new president comes in, he gets to choose his own cabinet. So the Postmaster General is a 100% appointed position by the by the by the president. So keep that in mind that a lot of times the postmaster general is not like he doesn't have any actual experience doing like handling the mail or anything. He's just kind of one of the big donors behind the presidency and the election campaign and such. So yeah, if we go to the next, and finally, the last one is the federal subsidies reduced and eliminated in the 1980s. So previous to this, the federal government subsidized USPS, United States Postal Service, and paid for it. Yet now they don't really anymore. I think there's some minor subsidies, but nothing that will keep them afloat. So anyway, let's go to the next slide, and you can see this is President Trump, obviously to the left, and then this is the head of the USPS. Where's his name? Oh my gosh. Louis DeJoy. And he is the head of USPS, and he actually he was just a businessman before this. Like he didn't have it's not like you work for the mail and you get promoted up into the USPS. No, they go and select the head of it. And this is actually surprisingly, it's the second highest paid government official job in the country after the president. So the president, I believe, makes $400,000 a year, somewhere around there. Obviously, that his wealth doesn't come from that $400,000, but that's his salary. And the postmaster general actually gets paid $250,000 a year. So he's the second highest paid government employee, which I found really interesting. And it kind of it's a little contradictory to the original model of the U.S. by the founding fathers. Is they never wanted politicians to actually be paid. They didn't want it. They wanted politicians to be called a citizen politician, where you're an American citizen and you get your income from your own work, and then on the side you're a politician as a civic duty as opposed to getting paid for it. But obviously that has changed over the years, as it kind of eliminates a lot of people from the poll of becoming a politician, because without a salary you need to be financially established. So it's a whole entire different thing, but it's kind of just shows that. Anyway, so let's go to the next slide and talk about the USPS and politics. So, due to COVID-19, U.S. voters are relying more on non-traditional voting methods. So, the 2020 election is happening in November, and due to COVID, a lot of people are very uncomfortable with going and physically voting in person. So, while they're relying on non-traditional voting methods, which is mail-in ballot. Here's a question by Griffith on. You would expect a businessman as the head to make it successfully financial, wouldn't you? Yeah, but I think also he is still the head of his other businesses too. And it's not. I don't think it's the role of the postmaster general. While he holds that department, it's kind of more of a political department as opposed to actually being influential in the day-to-day running and promoting the business to kind of run and become fiscally responsible and become successful. So the big issue with that is it's kind of more of a political position at the top. So we'll see that as we kind of go through this slide a little bit, as the postmaster general is allowing he backing President Trump as he goes and tries to go hold money back from the USPS. So that's kind of, he's actually supporting that as well, because it's more of a political thing than it is actually from the day-to-day running. I hope that makes sense. But mail-in ballots are available in all states, yet some states require qualifying reasons for this form of voting. So essentially being able to fill out your ballot and mail it in, you can do that in every state, but a lot of states require like you being having like a certain job or being on military leave or being a student in another state. So there's a little bit of requirements for being able to do it, but more states are making it available to everybody. So everybody can do a mail-in ballot. And the importance on that is mail-in ballots is a lot of people, underfunded communities, especially ethnic minorities, typically use mail-in ballots more so than anybody else due to the fact that polling stands close at 4. So in order to do that, you have to take off work if you want to vote in person. So people who don't have the financial background and stability necessarily can't really risk doing that and leaving their job. So that's why mail-in ballots are really important for and really popular in ethnic communities, and because of just lower income, typically you need to be able to if you want to vote and participate in the in democracy, you have to go and figure that out yourself. So that's one of the reasons why it's always been a little bit of a political battle. But so the underfunded UPS has become a forefront in the political battle of the 2020 election. It was actually really popular in the 2016 election too, and it's actually the roles have reversed. Whereas in the 2016 election, President Trump was the largest advocate for mail-in voting. Whereas now he's not. He's speaking completely against mail-in voting. So the way that it's worked is there's a very large COVID in the United States, where 25 billion of that was supposed to go of that fund was supposed to go to the USPS. Yet President Trump has withheld that because under the statement that allowing mail-in voting is going to lead to voter fraud. I don't believe that will be the case, and it wasn't. It's kind of proven that it isn't, but that's the rhetoric behind it, and that's why it's doing that. And there's a lot of support within the conservatives in the United States for that as that. So the Democrats, on the other hand, are trying to get mail-in voting to be more prominent because demographically it helps them a lot. Because low-income communities typically vote towards the left. Also, people who are typically more concerned about COVID-19 are lean left and typically will vote that way. So they're concerned that mail-in votes, which this is rhetoric that has come from the conservatives and the current federal government, is that mail-in votes that aren't in on the deadline for the election date will not be counted at all. So the issue is that to do that, the USPS has to collect the votes and then deliver them to a voting station. Yet with them becoming continually underfunded and the need for mail-in voting dramatically increasing, will it's kind of an issue. So there's going to be an issue with that. So that's kind of the premise behind why that's such a big thing in politics right now. And there's a lot of movements for people on both sides, and but to promote mail-in voting as kind of a new way. So anyway, I know my state of Washington, anybody can do mail-in voting. So it kind of goes hand in hand with the funding of the USPS. And if the USPS receives the funding, then it'll allow for the quicker processing time of mail-in votes, whereas if it doesn't receive the funding, it's going to be a lot more difficult and put a lot of strain on a lot of people who are already overworked. So that's the whole premise and background of that and the politics of it. So let's go to the next slide, and we can see a little map showing like the postal voting rules. This is from BBC. So typically you see the reason needed are the green states, so that means that you have to have a reason for why you would even be allowed to do a mail-in vote. The no reason needed means that you could apply. You have to apply for it, and that's in the majority of the countries. And then the purple is all postal voting, so that means you could just mail in votes. I guess I don't really know. Okay. So okay. Yeah, I don't really know the complete logistical difference between that, but I know the green states, the reason needed states, are important as you need to actively go and have a legitimate reason for mail-in voting, as opposed to and to be honest, I think a lot of places won't even accept fear of COVID-19 being the reason. So Texas actually is kind of an important state, which is the big one in the South, and Indiana, which is in the middle of the country. Those are pretty important. They're called battleground states. Texas never has been a battleground state until this year, actually. So a lot of preliminary polls have come out, and typically it's kind of the bastion and like defense of the right, and Texas will always vote right, typically in the past. Yet for this election, for a lot of different reasons, they're going. It's kind of up in the air now, so that's kind of a signal for polling and stuff. So that's why it's become really important, especially in Texas, to make sure that all votes will be counted, as opposed to having people excluded due to fear or due to economic instability. So anyway, that's kind of the gist of that. And if we go to the next slide, we can see there's actually some protests going on. This is actually outside his house of a lot of people going and protesting him for because he's promoted the kind of holding money back from the USPS, which some Americans view as an attack on democracy itself, because it's not letting people vote. So anyway, guys, that's kind of the whole entire USPS. I know it's a little bland subject, but I thought it's pretty interesting, and it kind of it's really actually come to the forefront of American politics. And I was watching the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, last night, and that was kind of a constant theme, was mail-in voting and allowing that. So anyway, let's get into our first discussion. But this is kind of my question for you guys, is like, what is the Russian Postal Service called? How is it funded? And like in the United States, there's a lot of private competitors like FedEx and UPS and Amazon. Is this similar in Russia? Yeah, that's kind of. I'm just wondering what you guys think on that. But because I really don't know, and that's one of those things that it's yeah, I just don't know. So yeah, I'm excited to hear about that. You guys mentioned that the mail is known for being slow, so I think that's pretty interesting, and so people say that here too as well, so that's pretty funny. And yeah, there's a ton of junk mail again. And then my second question is, what are the pros and cons of mail-in ballots? I kind of actually covered that. So you don't really need to answer that if you don't want to, but I would say, like, I mean, the pros of mail-in ballots is it allows everybody to vote and become part of the political conversation. Yet and I guess the con would be that it wouldn't get there on time. But so in the past, typically in the United States, we know who the president is on election day as votes come in, especially as things are more electronic nowadays. But in the past, we've had, especially in the 2000 election between George H.W. Bush and Al Gore, where we had it in Florida, where we didn't know who was the president for like a week. So it's and that's kind of a big thing, a big part of the rhetoric. I know Trump has made a huge part of the rhetoric because he wants Americans to know who the president will be on the day of the election. But other people are like, it doesn't really matter that it's on the day of the election. Isn't it more important that actually every vote's counted as opposed to just cutting it off? So that's the whole issue with that. So I guess the cons would be them not arriving on time. Also, says voter fraud. You need to put in and send your social security number. So that's like a very personal number that you have. So it's not really. It's kind of proven that actually isn't a thing. Especially that was one of the things that part of the 2016 election when Trump was elected. He made a big pull for mail-in votes, saying that he needs every American to vote. So I think it's interesting. So I think it's called Pochta России, Russia's mail, federally funded. And the only competitors are the DHL and Pony Express. Interesting. The Pony Express was like a U.S. name for the mail system as well, which is interesting. I know, actually, I watched like a History Channel documentary or something, and it was really interesting. It talks about like mail speed and how actually important that is to the holding together of large periods of lands. And it goes back to it like talks about the Mongol Empire and how their mail system was so efficient that they were able to get orders from one side of their empire in Russia all the way back to the Beijing or Ulaanbaatar, where the Mongolian leaders were from. So it plays a really important role as being able to go, and they empires were only able to grow as large as their mail system was able to grow, and effective communications, because if you can't effectively communicate, you have no way of fighting off some border threat. So that's kind of one of the reasons for the Roman Empire, is one of the reasons the overextension as it fell. A lot of that was because there's just a huge lack of communication, and they would find out they've lost large areas of land like months later than the events actually happening. So kind of interesting. Yeah. So Tatiana Orlova says, "Hi, Bob. Hello, Tatiana. Good to see you. Yes, in Russia, there is Amazon is popular. Wild berries, ozon are also famous in Russia. So OZON. So I guess those are the Russian mail state systems. Interesting. Very interesting, guys. Yeah, thanks for talking about that. Interesting. I'm gonna actually look into it more to see how they compare and contrast with here, as I've become now a mail expert after researching this for a few days. You guys use UPS, FedEx, Ozone. Oh, interesting. Oh, interesting. Okay, cool. So, yeah, Dasha says we have government postal service, which is awful, but we also use UPS, FedEx, Ozon, etc. I've never heard of Ozon, OZON. Is that it might be a European mail company or delivery company, but because that's not in the U.S. at all. So, Grapefruit Orange says I think a lot of Russians aren't fans of Pochta.ru because of the notoriously low quality of customer service and long wait times. Yeah, I could. That probably would equate to the DMV or the MVC, which is the Motor Vehicle Commission, and that kind of has a very a pretty for being really really slow. Whereas if you go to the DMV, you might as well just take off work all day because you're going to be sitting there all day. So that might be a thing. Whereas it clearly a little the bureaucracy, the bureaucratic level behind it clearly comes into play. Elizabeth Cole says we also have C-Decade is kind of good and popular. Okay. And Dina says there's one postal service similar to USPS. The service is a monopoly. Okay, so Soviet Union times called Pochta.ru, and like the guys have already said, yeah, it makes sense as through the transition to hold together that, and it's similar here. I mean, that is the big government one is USPS, and like all government documents actually have to go through USPS. So anyway, guys, let's get to the second part, or part 2 out of 3 of our presentation today, and we're going to talk about a little bit about the DNC. So the DNC is called the Democratic National Convention. A few weeks ago, I talked about the RNC, which is the Republican National Convention, and questions on whether or not that will be in person and such, and because it was scheduled to be, it is still scheduled to be in person, despite the fact that no other larger event is in person in the United States right now. So that's just something to keep in mind. But so on Monday night, the Democratic Party kicked off the Democratic National Convention. As you can see, this is kind of the backdrop for it. In the past, it's typically like a giant stage and a physical event where thousands and thousands and thousands of people come to go and see, and all like the top politicians go to the convention, everything. So but this year it was different, like very, very different, and it was completely done remotely, which is really cool, actually. So people would go and they would have speakers, and they would either pre-record their speeches or do it live. And they would go, and that like the big screen on that says Democratic National Convention, that would actually go and play the videos as like a large TV screen. So it was really interesting, and they're actually. Like you can watch it on social media now. Since it's so all virtual, they've made it really accessible to everybody. And as opposed to having to turn on the news for it, you can actually now watch it just on your iPhone or other like phone on Instagram. So really interesting. So typically, so the convention, the reason behind it, so the convention decides who the candidate will be for the to represent the party in the election. There's 2 conventions. 2 big ones anyway that actually really matter, the Democratic and the Republican. So I know this is Biden and Bernie Sanders were both running, and they got very far in the Democratic electoral process. So Joe Biden won out like overwhelmingly. I think so. Every single state has a certain number of delegates that go to the convention, and they vote on who they want to represent the party. So I know you need 2,136 votes, I believe. I think that's actually right. And I was watching last night, and Biden was at like 1,500, and Bernie Sanders was only at like 400. So he clearly just won. And we all knew this beforehand, but this is kind of how to make it official. So also at the convention, you see a lot of prominent party members speaking to the American public. So the big ones was Michelle Obama, the ex-first lady. She spoke. She actually had like the opening speech. It was a very, very compelling speech, kind of looking into the actual state of America and the future of that. So that was really a really powerful speech. So she spoke. Barack Obama spoke. Joe Biden, Dr. Jill Biden, that's his wife, and former second lady, which is she. Because Joe Biden actually was the vice president under Obama. Bill Clinton, former U.S. president. Bernie Sanders, large party leader, and a ton of others spoke who essentially they go and they speak and they show their support by this guy, and then they attack the other party. That's kind of how it works, and to really grab other all the demographics and to kind of show unity in the party, I guess. But so this is really interesting this year, and is really unconventional that you really rarely ever see. So John Kasich, he was the governor of Ohio, and he joined the convention. So he was a former governor of Ohio or senator from Ohio, and he actually ran for under the Republican ticket, which means running for the Republican Party during the 2016 election. But obviously, he wasn't nominated. Trump was nominated for the election. But so instead, what typically is once people and old party members, they'll go and they'll support their party. They kind of follow the party line with the Republicans or Democrats, whether or not it's pick one and choose, and that's kind of your line for life in politics. But he went and actually spoke at the convention against the current Republican Party and incumbent. So that was really unconventional, and we really never ever see that. So that's that was really interesting to see. And I kind of think it's a lot of changing attitudes towards a lot of politicians. So it's interesting. Anyway, so if we go to the next slide, we have this is Joe and Jill Biden. They are Biden is the Democratic nominee, and he'll be running one-on-one versus Trump. So there's going to be some debates up in here in a few weeks. And that is his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, and she was the old second lady. So I just wanted to show you that picture. It's really tough to actually. It was really hard to find any pictures from the actual convention because it's all virtual, so it's a little different. But anyway, let's go to the next slide. And this is John Kasich. This is the guy that I was talking about who crossed over party lines and actually went and endorsed Biden over Trump. So that's kind of really interesting. You really rarely see old Republicans doing that and same thing for the other side. So we'll see how that actually plays out. And the really important thing to this is Ohio is one of the battleground states. So it holds a lot of electoral college votes, which is the whole entire voting system in the United States. Because there's a really high population, and it's a really big mix of rural and urban. So typically, urban votes left while rural votes right. So it's kind of really up in the air for whether or who it will fall under, and we never really know. But by him doing this, he's kind of pushing a lot of people who are on the edge to go and vote left as opposed to voting right this year. So that's kind of the politics behind it. If we go to the next slide, this is also General Colin Powell. So he actually used to be the five-star general of the United States, and he was part of the Trump administration for as the Secretary of Defense. So essentially the top military guy. He was the top military guy talked to, and he ran for I actually don't know if he was under the Trump administration. He might have been under the Bush administration, but he's a very well-known Republican, and he actually ran for election this past year. He didn't in 2016 as well, and went and he spoke at the Democratic National Convention last night too, endorsing Biden, which is also another really big character for the Republicans, because typically the Army votes right. So by doing this, he might pull some of them to vote left. So it's just really interesting, and this is all the nitty gritty politics of it all. And sorry, guys, with that. But it's definitely, it's kind of, if you don't have the background knowledge, it's a little tough to understand it. So anyway, let's go to the next slide, and this is Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, and she is like she's the most progressive member of Congress. She's a senator from New York, and she got on the stage, and people were actually very unhappy that they only let her speak for 60 seconds. They gave her a 60-second time slot, and a lot of people were very unhappy about that because she has a lot of followers and a ton of support in especially young college-educated Americans and younger people of minority. So that she has a ton of support through that. So people are a little upset that she only got a minute to speak. So I thought I would point that out. She's kind of one of the bigger politicians that has come to the forefront of U.S. politics really ever since Trump became elected. So anyway, we're going to go to the next slide. It's called talk about the RNC. So unlike the Democratic National Convention, the Republican Convention will take place in person this year in Charlotte, North Carolina. So the convention will be held on August 24th. And I don't know. I know the McCloskeys, they're a St. Louis couple, which is from Missouri, and they will be speaking at the convention. I don't know if you guys know who they are. I knew they took forefront in, like, they were like on the head of BBC, and they kind of felt they were like a huge storyline that got a lot of international attention. So I don't know if you know who they are, but I just wanted to point that out. So they are actually a couple who, during the protests and the peaceful marching in St. Louis, went out on their front lawn with an assault rifle and a pistol and started threatening protesters. So kind of the defenders of the Second Amendment, which is the right to carry. So I was really surprised to read this, and that's why I was bringing up that they were actually invited to speak at the convention for the Republican Party by Trump. So that's kind of it's really interesting, and I don't know why. I think I don't think it's a very good decision just because they isolate so many people. But anyway, if we go to the next slide, we can actually see the picture of them on their front lawns, and this kind of picture went viral across the country. So they're for whatever reason, I guess they're defenders of the Second Amendment and kind of the opposite to the protests. I mean, they're like literally the images. They're the spitting image of the opposite of it is. So I mean, it's kind of really powerful imagery, and I'm sorry that it's a little inappropriate, I guess, with the guns and stuff, and it's pretty political. But I thought it was important just to kind of bring up and show. So I mean, the fact that these guys are speaking at the convention, which is interesting. There's a lot of other, obviously, really high-profile Republicans speaking and endorsing Trump there. They didn't release their full list of people yet because it's coming out next week. So anyway, that's what I just wanted to bring that up. Anyway, so let's go to the next slide and talk about the discussion for the national conventions. We're just going to fly through this discussion because I got a whole little topic I wanted to cover, and we only got about 10 minutes left. So what are the reasons behind holding the Democratic National Convention virtually while the Republican National Convention will be in person? Like I've pretty consistently mentioned over the course of my time with doing Last Week in America, is that COVID has really taken on a political role in the United States, where wearing a mask has kind of strangely become a political affiliation now, where it's a whole entire thing, whereas one side believes the other side had just made it up as a hoax. I mean, there's a lot of conspiracy theory. Like one of the primary conspiracy theory behind it is that the Democrats made up coronavirus and to Trump will get out of office. So it's really it's taken such a political role in the United States, whereas That's one of the reasons that the Republicans are holding it in person, is to go and reinforce that political ideology, and that's why the Democrats are holding it virtually, to reinforce the ideology of safety and public health. So that's kind of the reasons behind it, and why it's being held like that. It kind of just, it's actually like such a really a visible representation of the dramatic divide and the political landscape in the United States right now with terms to public health and COVID. So, and I mean, as you guys must know, I mean, the United States has more cases than anybody in the world. We have, I believe, 25% of the world's cases, yet our population's only like 6% of the world. So it's yeah, it's interesting. So anyway, let's go to the next slide and talk a little bit about that on the schools. So it's kind of a topic that I actually have a lot of interest in, and I was a big part of. I was a member of a fraternity in college and part of Greek life. So called Greek Life on the Hot Seat. And so as students head back to campus, fear of the coronavirus has not been off their will to party. Packed living conditions, large parties, and rush week is when people has led to a large uptick in cases at universities across the United States. The University of North Carolina, which we see on the right, the UNC Tar Heels, they shut their doors for the term on Monday after a huge spike in COVID cases. And then Notre Dame, which is one of the premier U.S. universities, was in person, and they shut down their doors and gone completely mobile yesterday on Tuesday. So that kind of is taken it's kind of a big thing in the U.S., whereas the colleges are really trying to figure out whether or not they can do in person. A lot of public universities are doing in person, yet we've seen, and there's more schools other than this that are getting shut down because the cases are just getting crazy. So despite what they're trying to do and keeping social distancing. Oh yeah, sorry, Grapefruit Orange. What's Rush Week? Yeah, I was about to I brushed over that. So Rush Week is when students typically when they're in their first year in college, they go a week before school starts, like the actual learning part. They live on campus and they do Rush Week, which was if they want to be a part of Greek life, which is kind of the fraternities and sororities, kind of the Greek system, like a social network within universities themselves. If they want to become part of that, they actually go from house to meet people all week. A lot of times it's pretty organized, especially for girls, where they'll have like assignments. You're going to go here and talk to these people for 30 minutes and these people for 30 minutes. One day you're going to go here, and then slowly you whittle down the people that you like to talk to and you get a bid is what they give you, is like they'll go in the middle of the night, they'll like slide a letter under your door or they'll bang on your door. And I know some cases they'll go and spray like alcohol on you, beer showers and that kind of stuff. It's like a whole entire cultural thing in the United States that really deals with colleges. So that's that, and then you can join that fraternity or sorority that you get the bid to. So that's Rush Week, and it's really, really, really popular, especially in the South. I know it's actually the school I go to at University of Washington is really popular, and they had a bunch of fraternity parties and a lot of coronavirus cases, but we're completely online anyway. So that's Rush Week. But yeah, so I that's kind of wanted to show that Greek life is kind of, it's all just 18 to 22-year-old kids who think they're invincible. So they're not like actively taking precautions to wearing masks or social distancing or yada, yada, yada. So I know in some schools, like there's whole like floors of fraternity houses and sorority houses, which is just for people who get COVID and who are sick, because typically it doesn't really kill people or that are in that age group and who are young and healthy. So they're not the at-risk people, so a lot of people just don't care. It's really crazy. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. And this is actually a picture of Notre Dame on campus before they shut down, and you can see the students are wearing masks and such. But it's just kind of trying to go about the sense of normalcy, you know. Anywho, yeah, let's go to the next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of Greek life, and what it is in the U.S. So Greek life, basically fraternities for men and sororities for women, is a really important institution in and really unique U.S. institution that important role in the lives of many college students. So a lot of college students go and they join these groups, and the history behind it originally, so the first fraternities were actually founded at Union College in New York. This is the seal on the right, in 1825. This is actually where I went to college. That's so, which is why there's like a really close tie with the history of it for me, and I was really interested in that. But like this is where, yeah, where I went to school is where they all started. And obviously, as you can imagine, it was a really big part of life where I went to school. So originally they were found at like liberal arts small schools, and that the reason behind that is at these schools at the time in the 1800s they would really only teach like philosophy, church, like clerical teachings, because everything was pretty religious, and it was like kind of religious philosophy, theology. They teach theology, mathematics, and like the humanities, which is our history and English. It's like the traditional Greek style of teaching, is kind of what they did. So they went, actually no, not Greek life style of teaching. It was like the traditional like Latin style of teaching with the church, and pretty old European model for the ideas that they taught, and like the curriculum was that. So people, young men, didn't necessarily want to only learn about that, yet they weren't allowed to talk about anything else in the classroom, otherwise they'd be kicked out. So they created Greek fraternities, which are like just secret. They're secret societies and organizations that they labeled with Greek letters, and they were able to talk about philosophy and things that they weren't allowed to talk about in school with their peers. So that's kind of the history for why they exist. Obviously, that's not really the reason anymore. Typically, they're mostly focused on developing brotherhood and being part of a larger group with people, and a lot of parties. It's a lot of party too, which is like it's kind of the social network for U.S. colleges, which is a really important role in a lot of students' lives. So they gained much popularity during the 80s, especially post-Vietnam when people came back. Who fund fraternities and sororities? So that's a very good question. They are funded by they have a very large national organization as well that goes and funds them, and they are funded by the students themselves. We pay in. They're called dues, is what you pay, and a lot of that is for maintenance of a house and yada 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 yada. It's funded by the members themselves, as opposed to the schools. The school really doesn't give funding, depending on the school, of course. But from where I went, they did not fund us at all. So yeah, but and then fraternities also undergo much criticism, and a lot of that is the whole thing of hazing. And a lot of fraternities and sororities have been accused of hazing and such. Yeah, that's kind of a big thing. Is there's it's just so the reason behind it is Vietnam War veterans came back and got very involved in fraternities and fraternities first, and brought military hazing into the fraternities as kind of like a new way to join a brotherhood, yada yada yada. And then the girls took it up too, and it's a really big part of sororities as well, whereas it's kind of more of emotional and stuff for girls as opposed to the physical hazing, where it's a lot of it's very wrong, and I think we've seen a lot of it has just gone away over the years. But you'll still hear stories that pop up now and ever again of someone forcing someone to drink too much alcohol and then them dying. So it's terrible, and it's kind of a really bad thing for the Greek life itself as a whole. And we're going to kind of see that. I think we'll see Greek life die out more and more in the future, as that people there's just so much more awareness now than there was, say, 10 years ago or 20 years ago on hazing and large consumption of alcohol. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. And this is actually the crest and the letters for the fraternity I was in. It's called Theta Delta Chi, and that's what this is my fraternity that I was in college. Is one of it's like the 7th fraternity in the country, and we were founded in like 1847, I believe, on Halloween, which is October 31st. So That was kind of cool. And then let's go to the next slide, and we can see this is a sorority house. I just Googled like the largest sorority house in the country, and these are kind of like what the houses in the South look like. This is for Kappa Kappa Gamma. I believe this might be at Alabama, but like they've kind of really taken over and become a big part of the South, and a lot of times they kind of like promote the old systems and Southern way of living and such, where it's pretty gender divided, where I know that a lot of sorority houses, men aren't even allowed inside, and it's supposed to be like very formal with how people treating you got to lunch and all this stuff. I don't know. I'm not really interested in that. But yeah, anyway, that's kind of just wanted to introduce that to you guys. And then we're go back finally to our last discussion. So do you think American universities will remain open in the fall? Why or why not? That's our question. But I just want to acknowledge, Dasha, thank you very much for your comment. I really appreciate that. The comment was, your election and political systems are extraordinarily complex, but it's really fascinating at the same time. Thank you for explaining everything clear. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I've been trying to explain it clearly, but it's even a lot of times it's even a little bit over my head. And the way I've tried that is I just read the news constantly to see and all aspects. You have to read every angle of the political spectrum, because it's so tied with the media, where you have CNN, which is the left news network, where they'll just kind of post things that go and kind of undermine the right, whereas Fox News is the right, and they'll go post things that undermine the left. And so you got to read both of them and try to find some middle ground. But yeah, Grapefruit Orange says, I finally understood what Greek life is. Thank you for explaining. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, it's probably such a weird thing outside the United States, yet it's such a big part of like college life here, and going to university is asking people is like, oh, are you rushing? Are you going to go Greek? And that kind of thing. So that's a pretty normal conversation. And like, I've gone and I've seen, and it's like a kind of a national brotherhood, where a lot of times it's actually used for like networking and getting jobs once you graduate. It's like you're kind of an alumni of like a secret society organization that when you go and apply, like I'm on my fraternity's like Facebook page, and there's constantly people like, hey, we're looking for like a mechanical engineer in the Boston area or something, looking for brothers to apply because we're brothers. And yeah, so it's kind of, that's how it actually comes outside of the college, and it kind of applies a little bit to the real world. And then you're in your families. If your parents were part of a fraternity, you typically join the same fraternity, whether or not it be anywhere across the country. It's kind of yeah. But anyway, it's kind of like a whole familial tie thing too as well. But anyway, so I don't know if American universities will remain open for the fall. I think that the large public universities will not be able to. I think private universities will stay open just because of the funding itself. I think public universities, it's just the size and the scale. I think they'll go virtual, but yeah. So I don't know. I think public universities are not long for this world in coronavirus, and they're going to go virtual. But yeah. So anyway, so Dina Peltz asks, what do people do in fraternities and sororities except partying? We would have study groups where we would go and we would go sit down and study together in the library. A lot of times it was just goofing off, but it was really handy having someone who was a year older. So there's different years. So I joined when I was a sophomore and in college, and there were seniors in college. So we would go, and like having someone to talk to that took an engineering class before me or has any advice. That was nice. So one of the big things that they do is philanthropy. That's a really, really big part of it. Is going and raising money and spreading awareness for charity. So we would do almost every single week, or like twice or three times a month, we would go out and go for like do a 5K and raise money from our parents and from other kids at school. I know we did We worked a lot with to support autism, to support funding for that and research on that. And we did it. We hosted. We were a pretty sports oriented group of guys, so we would go and we would do things like alley oop. We held a fundraiser called Alley Oop for Autism, where they would go and it would be like a basketball tournament where people would buy in, and all the proceeds go to charity. So that's kind of the big thing that they do. Um, is mostly it's philanthropy. That's kind of how it is. And we would go actually and team up with other fraternities and sororities and go and raise money. So it was pretty cool. And then yeah, I would say those are like the main real things. Is that, I mean, the partying aspect is definitely a big part of it. We would do a lot of intramural sports together, where we would go play sports on the same team, and we played a lot of flag football. And I was a big member of that. And that was fun. But yeah, I hope that answered your question. Anyway, guys, it is 12:05 now, so I'm in my time in New Jersey. So I'm gonna wrap up. But I just want to say thank you very much for everybody who joined me. If you guys have any questions personally for me, throw it in the chat. I'll hang around for a few more minutes. But I just want to say thank you. It's always a pleasure. We will be hosting again Last Week in America next week, and that's actually going to be my last week hosting Last Week in America. For members who are part of the discussion clubs, I'll still be doing that. But yeah, so yeah, so thank you. Check out the page, by the way. Like, comment, subscribe on American Central Center Moscow. Sorry, I'm feeling a little under the weather, but all right, guys. Well, thank you very much. And Ustufovich Nerman, the question: do Americans know what happening in Belarus? Yes, there's it's pretty active on social media here. So anyway, guys, thanks a lot. I really appreciate everything, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.